February 9th, 1936. The Waldorf Towers, 39th floor. A leather case landed on a marble table in front of Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. Inside it sat $500,000, banded, counted, smelling faintly of ink and cedar. The room was warm. The radiators downtown never clanked. They breathed. 6 men watched him. Nobody spoke. Downtown expected gratitude. They got silence. Bumpy Johnson looked at the money the way a carpenter looks at a crooked wall. He closed the case with one finger. He slid it back across the marble. Then he said 7 words. "You have misunderstood what Harlem is worth." Nobody in that suite had ever heard a man refuse $500,000. Not in 1936. Not in the middle of a depression. Not from a black man in a borrowed overcoat with $40 in his pocket. 4 months later, the man who made that offer was standing trial. And every policy bank above 110th Street was still owned by the people who built it. So what happened in that room? What did Bumpy Johnson ask for instead of the money? And why did $500,000 become the most famous number in Harlem for the next 30 years? To answer that, we go back 4 months, back to a winter street with no heat in it, back to the night Harlem learned its price. Lenox Avenue at dusk, October 1935. The streetlights came on one at a time, buzzing like trapped flies. A trumpet leaked out of a 3rd-floor window and died in the cold. 2 boys ran a hoop down the sidewalk. An old woman shouted at them to slow down. Nobody slowed down in Harlem that year. The air smelled like fried fish and wet coal smoke. Somewhere behind that smell was fear. It had a taste, copper and pennies. Dutch Schultz had died in a New Jersey tavern 11 days earlier. For 6 years he had squeezed Harlem's numbers game with both hands. Now his hands were gone, and 200,000 nickels a day had no owner. Understand what the numbers game actually was. It was not a syndicate invention, it was a Harlem invention. A man bet a nickel on 3 digits, maybe a dime, maybe a quarter on Friday. The winning number came from the day's racing handle printed in the paper. You could not fix it, that was the whole point. The odds were 600 to 1. The payout was 500 to 1. Everybody knew the house kept the difference. Nobody minded. Because the house was your neighbor. Because the bank on 135th Street loaned money when no white bank would. Because the banker paid your rent in January and never mentioned it in June. 12 banks, 2,000 runners, 40,000 players a day. That was the machine. That was the money downtown had finally learned to count. Bumpy Johnson stood on the corner of Lenox and 142nd and watched the Cadillacs idle. He was 30 years old, 5'8", a scar on his scalp that gave him his name. He wore a gray coat with the collar turned up. He had a felt hat that had been reblocked twice, and in his left coat pocket he carried something that did not belong to a gangster. A plumb bob, brass, the size of a pear, heavy for its size. A cord ran out of the top of it, waxed and gone brown with age. The tip was worn to a soft point from 40 years of touching floors. It had belonged to his father. He turned it over in his fingers when he was thinking. The men around him had learned to read that. When the brass came out of the pocket, the talking stopped. "They're back," said a voice behind him. Junie Reese stepped out of the Cadillac and left the engine running. They called him Cadillac because he never turned an engine off. Not once, not ever. He said a cold engine was a coffin with a steering wheel. He had a gold tooth and a laugh you could hear across an avenue. He was not laughing. 2 cars on 126th, Cadillac said. Downtown plates, just sitting. How long? Since noon. Bumpy Johnson kept turning the brass in his hand. "They're counting," he said. "Counting what?" "Us." The second man came around the front of the car. Deacon Pettiford, 51 years old, ink on 2 fingers of his right hand that never fully washed out. He had sung baritone at Abyssinian Baptist for 22 years. He also kept the cleanest set of books in Harlem. He carried them in his head and in 3 notebooks nobody else could read. "They already know the count," Deacon said. "That's the part nobody wants to say out loud." "Say it out loud. Somebody downtown has our numbers, real numbers, not guesses." The wind came up off the Harlem River and got into everybody's coat. Bumpy Johnson said nothing for a long moment. Then he put the plumb bob back in his pocket. "Get me the 12, he said. "Tonight?" "Tonight." Here is a thing worth knowing about Bumpy Johnson. He did not own a bank, not one. He had no vote at that table. He had no percentage of anybody's slips. He had a reputation, a record, and the ear of a woman named Stephanie St. Clair. Madame St. Clair had built her policy bank out of $10,000 in pure nerve. She was from Martinique. She spoke French when she was angry. She had taken out advertisements in the Amsterdam News to warn Harlem about crooked police. She had gone to prison rather than pay a bribe. She had hired Bumpy Johnson when he came out of Elmira with nothing but a prison haircut and a reading habit. Everybody assumed he was her muscle. Everybody was half right. He was her argument. They met in the back room of a restaurant on 7th Avenue. 12 bankers, 1 long table, steam heat hissing in the pipes, coffee, cigar smoke, a ceiling fan turning slow because nobody had turned it off since August. Wilhelmina Cotton was there. She banked the West Side blocks and wore black gloves indoors. Pomeroy Sykes was there. He had started as a runner in 1921 and now ran 40 men. Ambrose Teal was there. He sat closest to the door and kept his hat on his knee. Remember Ambrose Teal? Madame St. Clair sat at the head of the table because nobody had ever successfully asked her not to. Bumpy Johnson stood behind her chair. He did not sit. "They will come," Madame St. Clair said. "The only question is what they will offer first." "Money," said Wilhelmina Cotton. "Money is polite," Madame St. Clair said. "They begin polite." Pomeroy Sykes tapped the table twice. "Then what's the harm in listening?" The room got very quiet. The radiator hissed. Bumpy Johnson reached into his coat. He set the brass plumb bob on the table. It landed with a soft, heavy knock. Everyone heard it. "You know what this is?" he asked. Nobody answered. "My father was a barber and a fair carpenter. This hung on his belt." He let the cord out an inch. The brass swung and settled. "You hold it up. Gravity does the rest. It don't care who's watching. It don't care who's angry. It just tells you the truth about the wall." He lifted it and let it hang above the tabletop. The room watched a piece of metal not move. "They're going to offer you a number," Bumpy Johnson said. "When they do, hold it up against what you built. See if it hangs straight." He put the brass back in his pocket. Then he walked out and left 12 bankers arguing behind him. That was the way he worked. He never won a room by staying in it. Outside, the cold had turned mean. Half-Pint Mabry was waiting under the awning, 17 years old, swimming in a man's overcoat. He ran slips on 135th Street and knew every stoop between 5th and 8th. "Mr. Johnson, walk with me." They went north. The sidewalk was slick. A newsstand had the Amsterdam News tied in a bundle still unopened. "You hear anything today?" Bumpy asked. 2 white men came in Sanford's lunch counter, asked what the Daily Handle was. Who answered them? Nobody, but they already had a number wrote down. Bumpy Johnson stopped walking. "What number?" Half-Pint looked at his shoes. "They said Harlem does 150,000 a week." The wind cut down the avenue and rattled a loose sign. The boy was shivering. Bumpy noticed it and did not say anything about it. He took off his scarf and handed it over. "Put that on. I ain't cold. Put it on anyway." The boy put it on. "That number's wrong," Bumpy Johnson said quietly. "Too high? Too low?" And that was the first thing that frightened him. Because a man who guesses too low is guessing. A man who guesses too low on purpose is negotiating. 2 nights later, the first offer came. Not to Bumpy, to Ambrose Teal. A man in a camel coat sat down in Teal's storefront and put an envelope on the counter. $50,000 for his book, his runners, and his silence. Teal said he'd think about it. The man in the camel coat said thinking was healthy. Then he mentioned Teal's daughter by name and asked how her lungs were doing this winter. Then he left. He did not raise his voice once. That was the new thing in Harlem that autumn. The old trouble had shouted. This trouble whispered and knew your daughter's name. Deacon Pettiford brought Bumpy the news at 6 in the morning. They sat in a basement kitchen with a coal stove going. The air smelled like scorched coffee and lamp oil. 50,000, Deacon said, for a book that clears 60 a year. That's my point. It's not a purchase, it's a test. Bumpy warmed his hands on the cup. He did not drink from it. How many others got envelopes? 3 that I know of. Teal took the meeting. Cotton threw the man out. And Sykes? Deacon hesitated. Sykes asked how the payments would be structured. Bumpy set the cup down. The stove ticked. Somewhere above them a radiator started clanking and the sound went straight through the floorboards. That clank. That specific iron patient clank. And Bumpy Johnson was 11 years old again. Charleston, South Carolina, 1916, not a radiator, a hammer. His father worked wood in a shed behind the house on Beaufort Street. The whole yard smelled like sawdust and hot rosin. In the summer, the air was so thick you drank it instead of breathing it. Young Ellsworth held the string while his father worked. That was the job. Hold the string. Don't let the brass swing. You let it swing, you get a lie, his father said. You wait, you get the truth. The boy was not good at waiting. That August, his father built a set of stairs for a man on Rutledge Avenue. 11 days of work, oak treads, hand-cut stringers. The price had been agreed to in front of 2 witnesses. $40. When they went to collect, the man came out onto his own new porch and looked down at them. He said the work had taken too long. He said the wood was cheaper than promised. He counted out $12 into William Johnson's palm. 12. Ellsworth felt his own face get hot. He looked up at his father. His father was not looking at the man. He was looking at the stairs. "Sir," his father said, "the agreement was 40. "The agreement's what I say it is." There were 2 other men on the porch. One of them laughed. The boy's hands closed into fists. He was 11. He weighed 80 pounds. His father put one hand flat on his shoulder. Not hard, just heavy. The heaviest thing that ever touched him. They walked home in the sun. $12, 11 days. Neither of them spoke for 8 blocks. Finally, Ellsworth said the only thing in his head. "Why?" His father kept walking. "Because if I raise my voice on that porch, I don't come home. And if I don't come home, he wins twice." They passed a church. They passed a woman hanging wash. So he just wins once. "He wins once," his father said. "Today." That night the boy could not sleep. He sat on the back steps with the shed door open behind him. The plumb bob hung from a nail inside, catching a little moonlight. His father came out and sat down next to him. He did not apologize. He did not explain. He took the brass off the nail and put it in the boy's hand. It was cool. It was heavier than it looked. It always was. "Feel that?" "Yes, sir." That's not strength. That's not anger. That's just weight hanging where it belongs. Nobody can argue with weight, son. They can cheat you on the price, they can't cheat you on the level. Ellsworth Johnson sat there a long time after his father went inside. He made himself a promise the way boys do, in words too big for them. He promised that one day he would be somewhere that a man could not take $12 from him and laugh. Not by shouting. By being so exactly level that the whole crooked house would have to admit it. 3 years later, his family sent him north to Harlem. They said he had too much anger in him for South Carolina. They were right. Harlem had room for it. The coal stove ticked. The radiator clanked again. Deacon Pettiford was watching him. "You went somewhere," Deacon said. "Charleston. That's a long way for 6 in the morning." Bumpy Johnson stood up. "Set me a meeting with Ambrose Teal, not his store, somewhere quiet." "What are you going to do to him?" "Nothing." Deacon frowned. "He's about to sell us." "He's about to be sold," Bumpy said. "There's a difference, and I'd like to know which one before I decide anything." Teal came to a pool hall on 8th Avenue at 4 in the afternoon. The place was almost empty. 2 old men shooting slow. The click of the balls was the loudest sound in the room. Teal sat down and did not take off his coat. "I know what you heard," he said. "Tell me what I heard." "That I'm weak." "I heard you took a meeting." "Same thing in this town." Click. A ball dropped. One old man grunted. Bumpy Johnson leaned back in his chair. "How old is your daughter?" Teal's jaw moved. 9. "And her lungs?" Teal looked at the table. "Doctor says she needs to be somewhere dry. Arizona, Colorado. That takes money. It takes more than I've got. That's the joke of it. Everybody thinks a banker's rich. I'm rich on paper on Tuesday and broke on Friday." He finally looked up. "They offered $50,000 cash this week. And you want to take it?" "I want my daughter to breathe." The old men kept shooting. Click, click. Bumpy took the plumb bob out of his pocket and set it on the felt-top side table. He did not explain it this time. "If you take their $50,000, you know what happens?" "I get called a traitor." "No, you get called a customer." Teal blinked. "They don't want your book, Ambrose. They want your runner's route sheets. They want to know which stoops pay and which don't, which cops take and which don't. 50,000 for that is nothing. It's a bargain so cheap it's insulting." "They insulted you and you didn't even hear it." Teal's hands were shaking. He put them under the table. "So what am I supposed to do?" Bumpy picked up the brass and let it hang from its cord. It swung once and settled dead still over the green felt. "You're going to let me buy the Arizona?" Teal stared. "What?" "Not the book. Not the route. The Arizona." "I don't take charity." "It isn't charity. It's a loan at no interest, and I'll expect it back when she's grown." "And in return?" "You take their next meeting. You listen. You say nothing. You come tell me every word." Teal sat very still. Then something went out of his shoulders that had been in there for weeks. "You'd trust me after this?" Bumpy Johnson wound the cord around the brass and put it away. "I don't trust you," he said. "I trust arithmetic. You're worth more to me honest than you're worth to them cheap." He stood up. "And Ambrose, get her a humidifier for the winter. That's now, not in Arizona." Click. The 8-ball dropped. That was the first move nobody downtown saw coming. Not because it was clever, because it was kind, and they had not priced kindness into the deal. Word moved through Harlem the way it always did. Through kitchens, through barber chairs, through the back pews after service. By Sunday, the story was on 135th Street. Bumpy Johnson had paid a banker's doctor bills and asked for nothing. Some people said he was building an army. Some people said he was building a debt. Both were true, but neither was the reason. Deacon Pettiford put it best, standing outside Abyssinian in his good coat with the Sunday hat streaming past. "You know what he's doing," he said to Cadillac Reese. "Buying loyalty. No, he's making it expensive for them to buy anything else." Then came November, and the pressure changed shape. A runner got picked up on 129th, not by the 32nd precinct, by men in a car with no plates. They took his slips, they took his shoes, they let him walk home in his socks. They did not hit him. That was the message: we can undress your whole operation and never raise a hand. Then a bank on Fifth Avenue missed a payout. Not because they didn't have the money, because the winning number had somehow been printed wrong in 2 morning editions. 40 people came to collect on a number that never hit. The crowd on the sidewalk got loud. An old woman named Miss Delphine cried on the curb because she'd played that number 11 years. She had it written on a card in her Bible. She had never won anything in her life, and for 2 hours she thought she finally had. Bumpy Johnson heard about Miss Delphine before he heard about the ledger loss. He went to her apartment on the 4th floor of a walk-up with no working buzzer. The stairwell smelled like cabbage and floor wax. He knocked. She opened the door in her church dress because company was coming. He paid her the 500 to 1 out of his own pocket. Then he sat and drank her terrible coffee and let her tell him about her late husband for 40 minutes. He never mentioned it to anyone. Half-Pint Mabry told the story for the next 30 years. Here is the part that mattered. Somebody had reached into a newspaper, not a Harlem newspaper, 2 downtown editions. That took money and reach and patience. Deacon Pettiford laid it out on the kitchen table with a pencil. "They're not coming for the banks," he said. "They're proving the banks can't protect the players. Break the trust and the nickels stop. No nickels, no bank. Then they buy the wreck for pennies." Cadillac Reese swore softly. "So what do we do?" Bumpy Johnson looked at the pencil marks a long time. "We stop defending," he said. "Meaning what?" "Meaning I want to know what we're actually worth. Real numbers, every bank, every route, every week for a year." Deacon went pale. "You want me to put Harlem's whole book on paper?" "Yes." "That's the most dangerous piece of paper in New York. That's why you're the only one who touches it." Deacon Pettiford took 11 days. He worked in a locked back room above a florist on 7th. He drank 16 cups of coffee a day and slept 4 hours a night. When he finished, he came to Bumpy's rented rooms at 2 in the morning. His fingers were black to the 2nd knuckle. He put a single folded sheet on the table. "Read the bottom line first," he said. "You'll want to sit down for the rest." Bumpy read it. The room was cold. The window had frost on the inside. He read it again. Then he set the paper down and looked out at the street. "Say it out loud," he said. Deacon said it out loud. "Harlem's policy banks handle about $30 million a year. 30 million. Gross handle, nickels and dimes, 40,000 people a day. And downtown offered 50,000 for a piece of it. Downtown offered 50,000 because they think we can't count." Bumpy Johnson stood at the window a long time. Below him a horse cart went by, hauling coal, hooves ringing on the cold stone. Steam came up out of a manhole and hung there under the street lamp. "No," he said finally. "No what?" "They can count. Then why insult us? Because an insult is a question. They're asking whether we know what we have." He turned around. "Deacon, how many copies of this exist?" "1. Make 2 more. Different hands, different rooms." "And Deacon." "Yes?" "When the offer comes, it will be enormous." "How do you know?" "Because they've been rehearsing us for 3 months. Nobody rehearses that long for 50,000. The offer came on the 6th of February. It came the way real power always comes. Politely, A man in a Hamburg walked into a barber shop on 145th Street where Bumpy Johnson was getting a shave. He waited his turn. He read a magazine. He did not interrupt. When the barber wiped the last of the lather away, the man stood up. "Mr. Johnson, my name is Frank Ruggiero. I keep books for people downtown. There's a gentleman who'd like 15 minutes of your time." Cadillac Reese shifted his weight by the door. Bumpy did not get out of the chair. "Where?" "The Waldorf Towers. Sunday would be convenient. Sunday's church." Ruggiero smiled without any teeth in it. "Then Monday, 2 o'clock. You'll want to come alone. It's a small room." He put on his hat. "And Mr. Johnson, nobody's angry at anybody. This is business." He left. The barber shop was silent for 10 full seconds. Then the barber said, "Lord." Bumpy Johnson got out of the chair and put on his coat. "Cadillac. Yeah. Sunday I need you to drive me somewhere first. Downtown, uptown, all the way up, and slow." That Sunday they drove Harlem. Not for business, not for collections, for 4 hours in a warm Cadillac with the engine never turning off. They went down Lenox with the church crowd coming out in their Sunday hats, purple, cream, navy blue with a feather that shook when the woman laughed. They passed men playing checkers outside Bloomstein's with gloves cut off at the fingers. They passed a boy selling the Amsterdam News who could not have been 10. They passed the Apollo Marquis with the letters half changed for the next bill. They passed the Renaissance Ballroom dark at noon waiting for night like a dressed woman waiting for a car. They passed Small's Paradise and the smell of fried fish came right through the glass. Bumpy rolled the window down to get it. The cold came in with it. He did not roll the window back up. "You all right back there?" Cadillac asked. "Keep driving." They went up 7th. They came down 8th. They passed a rent party being set up on a stoop at 1 in the afternoon 3 days early. They passed a woman scrubbing her own front steps in February because they were her steps. They passed a brownstone with black iron railings and a man repainting them by hand. They passed a numbers runner taking a slip from a woman's palm on 135th Street. The handoff took less than a second. Neither of them looked down. 40,000 of those a day. Bumpy Johnson watched all of it and said nothing for an hour. Then, near 155th, he finally spoke. "Junie." "Yeah, boss. What's your mother pay in rent?" "32 a month." "What's she make?" "She takes in laundry, maybe 18, 20. "And the difference?" Cadillac was quiet. "The bank on Edgecombe carries her in the slow months," he said. "Mr. Sykes never says nothing about it." Bumpy nodded slowly. The plumb bob was in his hand. He had not noticed taking it out. "That's the number they don't have," he said. "What number?" "The one that isn't money." They drove another block. "Junie, tomorrow when you drop me at Park and 50th. "Yeah, keep the engine running." "I always do." "I know, do it louder." The night before the meeting he did not sleep. He sat up in a chair with the lamp off and the plumb bob in his hand. He turned it over and over until the brass got warm from his palm. Brass takes a long time to get warm. He thought about a porch in Charleston. He thought about $12. He thought about his father saying that a man who shouts on that porch does not come home. And he understood finally what his father had actually been teaching him. It was not surrender. It was patience with a purpose. His father had lost $40 because he had no leverage. The whole point of a life was to go get some. Monday, February 9th, 1936. The Waldorf Towers had a private entrance on East 49th Street. Bumpy Johnson walked in through the front door instead. The lobby smelled like lilies and floor polish and other people's money. His shoes were shined, his collar was new, his overcoat was borrowed and it fit. A man in a uniform started toward him and then thought better of it. Ruggiero was waiting by the elevator. "You're early." You're on time. They rode up 39 floors in silence. The elevator operator had white gloves and did not look at either of them. The doors opened onto a hallway with carpet so thick it ate the sound of walking. Bumpy Johnson noticed everything. The exits, the men, the 2 ashtrays with no ashes in them, which meant the room had been cleaned an hour ago. Somebody had prepared. The suite had windows on 2 sides. Manhattan spread out gray and cold below. There were 6 men in the room, and one of them mattered. He was not big. He was not loud. He had a drooping eyelid from an old injury and a voice like a low engine. He wore a suit that cost more than most Harlem families saw in a year, and he wore it as if he had forgotten it was on. Charlie Luciano did not stand up. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Mr. Johnson, sit down." Bumpy sat. "You want a drink?" "No." "Coffee?" "No." Luciano almost smiled. "They told me you were quiet. They told me you were reasonable. Then everybody's been well informed." Time slowed. The leather case came up from the floor. It landed on the marble with a soft, expensive sound. The 2 brass catches went back at the same time. Click. The lid came up, green, banded, row on row, deep as a drawer. Somewhere behind Bumpy, a man shifted his weight on the carpet. The radiator did not clank. The room smelled like cedar and cologne and new ink. Click. The lid stayed open. $500,000, Ruggiero said. He said it slowly, the way you say a word to a child. Cash, no paper, no banks, today. Bumpy Johnson looked at it. He had never seen that much money in one place. Neither had anyone he had ever met. $500,000 in 1936. A house in Sugar Hill cost $8,000. A new Cadillac cost $1,200. A school teacher made $1,900 a year. $500,000 was 300 years of a working man's life stacked in a box. He let himself feel it for exactly 4 seconds. Then he put it down like a hot plate. "What's it for?" he asked. Luciano leaned back. "The banks come in with us, all 12, clean transition. You bring them, you vouch for them, you keep the peace uptown. They keep operating. We handle the layoff money and the protection. The $500,000 is yours, not theirs, yours. For your trouble." He spread his hands. "That's not an insult, Mr. Johnson, that's respect. In my experience, respect usually costs less. Then say yes and go be a rich man." Bumpy Johnson looked out the window. 39 floors down, the traffic moved without any sound at all. "May I ask a question?" "Go ahead." "What do you think Harlem does in a year?" Ruggiero answered before Luciano could. 8-9 million. Bumpy nodded as if that were interesting. 30, he said. The room changed temperature, not the air, something else. "Say that again," Luciano said. $30 million a year, gross handle. 12 banks, about 2,000 runners, 40,000 players a day. March is the strongest month. August is the weakest. Wednesday is the biggest day of the week, and nobody knows why. He did not raise his voice once. "That's not a guess, Mr. Luciano, that's a count." Ruggiero laughed too loudly. "Nobody counts nickels." "We do," Bumpy said. "That's the whole business, counting nickels." "That's the only reason it works." Luciano's fingers had stopped moving on the arm of the chair. That was the tell. "Prove it," he said. Bumpy Johnson reached into his coat. 2 men in the room reached toward their own coats. He took out a folded piece of paper and set it on the marble beside the money. 1 page, pencil. Deacon's small, tight hand. Luciano did not touch it. Ruggiero picked it up and read it, and the reading took a while. His face did an unattractive thing. "Is this real?" Luciano asked. "You can check it." "How?" Ask your own men what they collected in the Bronx in November. Then divide by their population and multiply by ours. You'll come within 4%. The room was very quiet. Outside, 39 floors below, a horn honked once. Luciano looked at the case of money on his own table, and for the first time it looked small to everybody in the room. You understand what you're doing, Luciano said. I think so. You're turning down $500,000. No, sir. No. I'm telling you the price. You misunderstood what Harlem is worth. That was the sentence. 7 words delivered flat in a room full of men who had never been corrected by anyone. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Charlie Luciano laughed. It was not a friendly sound, and it was not entirely unfriendly either. All right, he said. What's the number? There isn't one. Everybody's got a number. Not for this. Bumpy Johnson leaned forward slightly. You can buy a bank. You can't buy a neighborhood. You can buy a route. You can't buy a woman handing a boy a nickel on her way to work. She hands it to him because she knows his mother. The day she doesn't know him, the nickel stays in her pocket. And then you've bought $30 million worth of nothing. Luciano said nothing. You've been testing us since October, Bumpy said. The runner with no shoes, the 2 newspapers. You broke a payout and a woman on 140th cried on the curb. That cost you more than it cost me. How do you figure? Because I paid her out of my pocket and she told everybody. So now Harlem knows exactly one thing. Their money is safe with us and it is not safe with you. Ruggiero started to speak. Luciano lifted one finger and Ruggiero stopped. Time slowed. Bumpy Johnson stood up. He buttoned the middle button of the borrowed coat. He looked down at the open case. $500,000 still lying there with the lid up. He reached out and closed it with one finger. The catches did not snap. He did not push them. He slid the case back across the marble. It made a long, low sound on the stone. Thunk! It stopped against Luciano's hands. Sit down, Mr. Johnson. I'm listening, standing up. Sit down anyway. He sat. You say I can't buy it, Luciano said. Fine. What do you propose? And that was the moment. Not the refusal. The refusal was theater. This was the reason he had come. A partnership on 4 terms, Bumpy Johnson said. Say them. 1. The banks stay black-owned, every one, no exceptions. They keep their books, their routes, their runners. 2. No downtown men above 110th Street. Not collecting, not standing on corners, not ever. Anything you need uptown comes through me. Ruggiero made a noise. Luciano ignored it. 3. You take a percentage of the handle, a real one, negotiated once and never renegotiated. You get money without owning anything. You'll make more in 5 years than that case holds. And 4, the payouts never get touched again. Not the numbers, not the newspapers, not one nickel of a winner's money. Bumpy Johnson let that sit. If a woman in Harlem hits for 500 to 1, she gets paid that day. Or there's no deal and no peace and no 30 million. The room was silent. Luciano turned his glass a quarter turn on the marble. You're asking me to give up ownership. I'm offering you income without a war. You've had wars. You know what they cost. Dutch Schultz owned Harlem for 6 years. How's he doing? Somebody by the window inhaled sharply. Luciano's damaged eyelid did not move at all. Then, slowly, he smiled. You've got some nerve on you. I've got arithmetic. Same thing when it's true. He looked at the case, then at the pencil-written page, then at Bumpy Johnson. I'll think about it. Take your time. How much time have I got? As long as you like, Bumpy said. We're not going anywhere. That's the part nobody downtown understands. We live there. He stood again. He walked to the door and then he stopped and did the thing that made it a legend. He turned around. Mr. Luciano. Yeah, that case. What about it? Don't offer it to anybody else uptown. Why not? Because if they take it, I'll know they didn't have the count. And a man who doesn't know what he owns shouldn't be trusted with your money either. He put on his hat. Good afternoon. The door closed behind him. The elevator took 39 floors to reach the ground. Bumpy Johnson stood in the polished box with his hands at his sides and did not blink. The operator later told a bellman something he never forgot. He said the man's hands were shaking so hard he had to put them in his pockets. He said he had never seen anybody so scared stand so still. Outside on Park Avenue, the Cadillac was idling at the curb, loudly. Cadillac Reese leaned across and pushed the door open. Bumpy got in. The heater was going full. The windows were fogged at the corners. Well, drive. Boss. North, now. They went 8 blocks before either of them spoke. At 59th Street, Bumpy Johnson started laughing. It came up out of him like something breaking loose. Cadillac stared at him in the mirror. What happened up there? I turned down $500,000. The car swerved slightly. You did what? I turned it down. Man, my mother makes $20 a month. I know. $500,000. I know what it was. Cadillac gripped the wheel. So why? Bumpy Johnson looked out the window as Central Park went by, brown and bare. Because they only offer you that much once, he said, and the size of it tells you exactly how much more there is. Here is what most people get wrong about that afternoon. They think the story ends with the refusal. It doesn't. A refusal is only a story if you survive the week after it. And the week after it was the most dangerous week of his life. Word got out fast, it always did. By Wednesday, half of Harlem had heard a version of it. By Friday, the version had grown a car chase and a shootout that never happened. Miss Delphine told her whole building he had thrown the money out the window onto Park Avenue. Half-Pint Mabry did not correct her because he liked that version better. But downtown in the rooms that mattered, nobody was laughing. Frank Ruggiero came uptown on the 12th of February. He came alone, which was either courage or contempt. He found Bumpy Johnson eating breakfast at a counter on 7th Avenue. He sat down on the next stool. The place smelled like grits and bacon fat and burnt toast. Somebody's radio was playing low behind the register. You embarrassed me, Ruggiero said. You brought the wrong number to a man who counts. I brought $500,000. You brought a guess wrapped in cash. Ruggiero's hand was flat on the counter. Let me explain something to you about how this ends. There's 12 banks up here. You don't own any of them. I know. You're a hired man with a reputation. That's right. So all I have to do is find one banker who wants his own $500,000. One. Bumpy Johnson kept eating. You already tried, he said. You offered Ambrose Teal $50,000 in November. Ruggiero's flat hand did not move. He tell you that? He told me everything, including your name, which you should be more careful with. He also told me you asked about his little girl's lungs. Bumpy set his fork down. For the first and only time in the conversation, he turned his head and looked at the man. Don't do that again. 4 words. Ruggiero did not answer. Here's what you don't understand, Bumpy said, going back to his plate. You think you're buying a business? You're not. You're renting a habit. 40,000 people play a number every day because of trust. You can't buy trust. You can only inherit it or destroy it. And you can't inherit it. So, Ruggiero stood up. You're gonna get people hurt. Maybe. Doesn't that bother you? Bumpy Johnson was quiet for a second. Every day, he said. Ruggiero left. The counterman came over, pretending he hadn't heard anything. He refilled the coffee with a hand that was not entirely steady. On the house, Mr. Johnson. No. He put a dime on the counter. But thank you. The pressure came in 3 waves. The first wave was the police. Suddenly, the 32nd precinct discovered a passion for enforcement. Runners got swept up 11 at a time. Storefronts got padlocked over paperwork nobody had cared about in 9 years. Somebody was making calls from downtown to a desk in a building on 135th Street. Deacon Pettiford tracked it and found the shape of it in 4 days. It's not the precinct, he said. It's 2 men in it. Names. I've got 'em. Don't touch them, write them down. That's all. For now. The second wave was money. 3 banks got squeezed at once. Layoff money dried up. When a bank takes too much action on one number, it lays part of the risk off with a bigger bank. Downtown controlled the biggest banks in the city, so in the last week of February, they simply stopped answering the telephone. Wilhelmina Cotton got hit worst. A number came in heavy on the 26th. If it had hit, she would have owed $41,000 she did not have. It did not hit. She sat in her kitchen in her black gloves and shook for an hour anyway. Then she called Bumpy Johnson. I can't do another month of this, she said. I know. I've got 81 people who eat off my book. I know that too. Then tell me what to do, Ellsworth. Nobody called him Ellsworth. 2 people in the world. Hold on 11 more days, he said. Why 11? Because that's how long I need. And if I can't? Then take their money and I won't say a word against you. You mean that? I do. He did. That was the thing about him that his enemies never priced in. He gave people a door out and made them choose to stay. The third wave was the one he had been waiting for. On the 2nd of March, someone tried to buy Deacon Pettiford. Not with money, with a photograph. An envelope came to the church addressed to him in a woman's handwriting. Inside was a picture of his son, 19 years old, walking out of a lecture hall at Howard University in Washington. No note, no demand. Just a photograph of a young man with books under his arm taken from across a street. Deacon Pettiford brought it to Bumpy at midnight. He put it on the table and sat down and did not say anything for a long time. His ink-stained fingers were pressed flat against the wood so they would not shake. 22 years I've sung in that choir, he finally said. I know. I've never asked you for one thing. I know that too. I'm asking now. Bumpy Johnson looked at the photograph. The boy was smiling at something outside the frame. Say it. End this, Deacon said. However you have to. I'm too old to be brave. The radiator clanked. Bumpy took the plumb bob out of his pocket and set it on the table next to the photograph. The brass was cold. It had been out in the night with him. Do you know why I carry this? You've told me. Your daddy. That's half. He let the cord out and held it up. The brass hung motionless over the boy's photographed face. A plumb bob only works if you hold still, he said. You get scared, you shake, and the line lies to you. The whole trick isn't the weight, it's the hand. He set it down. 11 days ago, I asked Wilhelmina for 11 days. That leaves 9. 9 days for what? Bumpy Johnson looked up. For Harlem to close. Deacon Pettiford stared at him. Say that again. Every bank, every runner, every book. 5 days, no slips written, no numbers taken, no payouts, nothing. You want to shut down the entire policy game? Yes. That's $30 million a year. For 5 days, it's about $400,000. You're going to burn $400,000 of our own money. No, Bumpy said. I'm going to show them what 500,000 actually buys. He tapped the table once. They offered me $500,000 for Harlem. So Harlem is going to spend 5 days proving it's worth more than that in a week. Deacon sat back in his chair. The photograph lay on the table between them. They'll come uptown, he said. The minute the money stops, they'll come. Yes. And your answer to that is nothing. My answer to that is everybody. He leaned forward. When the banks close, what happens to the runners? They don't earn. And the storefronts they stand in front of. They lose foot traffic. And the church that gets $100 a month from a banker's pocket. Deacon Pettiford's mouth opened slightly. And the landlord who's been carried since October. And the doctor who gets paid in cash. And the 2,000 families that eat off 2,000 roots. You're not shutting down a racket, Deacon said slowly. I'm turning off a neighborhood's blood supply for 5 days. So that everyone downtown can watch 125,000 people notice at the same time. That's cruel. It's honest, Bumpy Johnson said. It's the same thing 5 days at a time. He picked up the photograph and handed it back. Send your boy a letter tomorrow. Tell him to stay at school through spring. And Deacon. Yes. After this, nobody ever mails you a picture again. You can't promise that. No, he agreed. But I can make it expensive. Getting 12 bankers to agree to lose money is harder than any confrontation with any mob. It took 4 nights. The meeting moved rooms twice because of the police sweeps. They ended up in the basement of a funeral home on 8th Avenue, which nobody found funny. The room smelled like carnations and floor cleaner. Pipes ran along the ceiling and dripped in one corner into a coffee can. Plink, plink. Every 11 seconds, Pomeroy Sykes went first, and he went hard. 5 days closed is 5 days my people don't eat. Correct, Bumpy said. You say that awful easy for a man with no book. You're right, I have no book, so I'll go first. He put an envelope on the table. That's every dollar I have, $9,400. It goes into a fund for the runners' families, starting tonight, not after. Silence. 9,000's not 5 days for 2,000 men, Sykes said. No, that's why each of you is going to match what you can. And what do we get? You get to still own your business in April. Wilhelmina Cotton spoke from the end of the table, gloves folded in front of her. And if we do nothing? Then in April, 3 of you are working for a man in a Hamburg. And by 1938, the other 9 are collecting a salary. A salary, she repeated. That's the word they'll use. It won't be the word for it. The pipe dripped into the can. Plink. Ambrose Teal cleared his throat. Every head turned. Nobody had expected him to speak. I took their meeting, he said. The room went dangerous. In November, I sat down with the man. I listened to the whole offer. Ambrose, somebody started. Let me finish. He put his hat on the table. They offered me $50,000. My daughter's sick. I was going to take it. I want everybody in this room to know that. He looked around at all of them. And the man who stopped me didn't threaten me one time. He paid a doctor. Nobody said anything. So I'm in for 5 days, Teal said. Whatever it costs. That's easy for you, Sykes said. You're the smallest book here. That's right, Teal said. So it's the last money I've got. Plink. Bumpy Johnson had not moved during any of it. Now he took the brass out of his coat and set it on the table with that soft, heavy knock. The sound cut through the basement. I told you all in October to hold this up against what you built. So hold it up. He let it hang from his fingers. 12 bankers watched a piece of metal refuse to move. "They think we're 12 books," he said. "We're not. We're one street that happens to have 12 doors. And on Monday morning, all 12 are going to be closed at the same minute." He looked at Sykes. "Pomeroy, you started as a runner in 1921. "That's right. How much did you make that first week?" Sykes's jaw worked. $2.40. "Who paid it to you?" "Casper Holstein's man." "And when your mother got sick in 24? Sykes did not answer. "Say it." "The bank paid the hospital." "Which bank?" "Ours," he said. "Harlem's." Bumpy Johnson wound the cord around the brass. "That's what they're offering to buy for $500,000. Not slips, that." He put it in his pocket. "Vote." They voted, 11-1. Sykes was the one, and then he changed it, and then he said he'd been the first man in the room to say yes to anything hard for 15 years, and he wasn't about to stop now. Nobody believed him. Everybody let him have it. That is how coalitions get built. Monday, March 9th, 1936. Harlem woke up and there was nowhere to play a number. The storefront on 135th was dark. The barbershop drop was closed. The candy store on Edgecombe had a hand-lettered sign in the window that said, "Closed this week. Ask nobody." 2,000 runners stayed home. At first, people thought it was a police raid. By 10 in the morning, the whole neighborhood knew it was not. By noon, the story was everywhere and it had one shape. "They tried to buy us. We said no, sit tight." Something strange happened over those 5 days. It has been described a dozen ways since and no version quite catches it. The avenue got quiet in a way it never got. Not empty, quiet. Men stood on corners with nothing in their hands and talked instead. Old women who had played the same 3 digits for 20 years sat by their windows. Miss Delphine on the 4th floor put her Bible card in the drawer and left it there. The Amsterdam News did not print a word about it. Everybody read the silence just fine. On the second day, a car with downtown plates came up Lenox Avenue. It drove slowly past 3 closed storefronts. At the 4th corner, it stopped. 40 or 50 people were standing on that corner doing nothing at all. They did not shout. They did not move toward the car. They just stopped talking and looked at it. Time slowed. A woman's hand went still on a stroller handle. An old man lowered his newspaper about 2 inches. Somebody's radio in a second-floor window kept playing to nobody. The driver's hand came up off the wheel. 50 faces, no sound, no motion. The car did not honk. It did not roll a window down. It made a slow right turn and went east and did not come back. Click. That was a car door locking from the inside. Everybody on that corner heard it. Half-Pint Mabry laughed so hard he had to sit down on a stoop. On the 3rd day, the pressure reversed. That is the part people never expect. Downtown was not losing Harlem's money. Downtown had never had Harlem's money. What downtown was losing was the layoff traffic. The Bronx books and the Brooklyn books had been quietly balancing their heavy numbers against Harlem's volume for years. With Harlem dark, a heavy number in the Bronx had nowhere to go. On Wednesday the 11th, a bank in the Bronx got caught on a number and could not lay it off. They had to pay out of pocket. $31,000. Thursday, another one. $19,000. 2 smaller books did not open Friday morning at all. Somebody in a suite on the 39th floor was getting phone calls. Deacon Pettiford heard about it first because Deacon heard about everything first. He came to Bumpy on Thursday night with his hat in his hands and something like awe on his face. "They're bleeding," he said. "How much?" 50,000 and change so far, and it's accelerating. Bumpy did the arithmetic out loud, quietly, the way he always did. 5 days at that pace is about 100,000. Yes, And a month? Deacon swallowed. More than the case. Say the number. More than $500,000. Bumpy Johnson nodded slowly. Then now they know. Know what? That they offered me $500,000 to buy something that cost them $500,000 a month to break. He almost smiled. They didn't insult us, Deacon. They underbid us. There's a difference, and it took me 5 months to see it. On the 4th day, they came for him, not with guns, with an invitation. Frank Ruggiero telephoned a barber shop on 145th Street at 9 in the morning. He asked for Mr. Johnson by name and said, please. Cadillac Reese held the receiver out with 2 fingers like it was a snake. Boss, it's him. Bumpy took it. Yes. You've made your point. Not yet. What does that mean? It means it's Thursday. We said 5 days. You'll come down Saturday? No. A pause on the line. No. You'll come up Saturday, Bumpy Johnson said. Uptown. Where uptown? The Hotel Teresa. 2 o'clock. 7th Avenue and 125th. You know I can't guarantee that he'll... Then don't guarantee it. He hung up the receiver gently. Cadillac was staring at him. You just told Charlie Luciano to come to Harlem. Yes. Boss, nobody does that. That's why it works. He put his hat on. Junie, between now and Saturday, I want the lobby of that hotel to look exactly like Harlem. Meaning what? Meaning don't bring anybody with a gun. Bring the bankers, bring their wives. Bring the choir if they'll come. Cadillac Reese laughed until he realized he was serious. You want the choir? I want the choir, Bumpy Johnson said. There is one more scene to tell before Saturday. It happened Friday night, and there were only 2 people in the room. 12 years later, a woman named Mamie Hatcher would marry Ellsworth Johnson. She would sit across from him in a kitchen on 147th Street after he came home from 10 years in a federal cell. And she would ask him about the $500,000 because by then everybody asked. He would tell her the whole thing. Then he would tell her about the Friday night before the Teresa. He had gone to see his mother's sister on 153rd Street. He had not gone for advice. He had gone because he could not sit still. She was 71. Her apartment was hot. Her hands hurt in the cold. She had come north from Charleston in 1919 with his family. She fed him pork chops he did not want and let him not talk for a while. Then she put a hand on the table and said what she had to say. You look like William. Do I? You've got his hands, you've got his way of sitting. She poured coffee. Your father died thinking he was a small man. Bumpy did not look up. He wasn't. I know that. He didn't. She sat down slowly. That's the thing about being level, baby. Nobody applauds a level floor. They just walk on it and never fall. The radiator clanked. Outside, someone was scraping ice off a windshield. He took the brass out of his pocket and set it on her tablecloth. She looked at it and her whole face changed. Lord, you still got that. I've had it since I was 11. You know what he'd say about Saturday? Tell me. He'd say, don't shout on the porch. He turned it over in his fingers. I'm not going to shout, Aunt Rebecca. No, she said. You're going to make them come to the porch. She reached across and put her hand over his. That's a different sin, and I don't know the name of it. Saturday, March 14th, 1936. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The Hotel Teresa stood white and enormous on 125th Street. 13 stories, the tallest thing in Harlem. The lobby had marble floors and a ceiling that carried every sound. At 1:45 it was full. 12 bankers, their wives, Wilhelmina Cotton in black gloves and a hat with a veil. Ambrose Teal with his daughter, who was having a good breathing day and wore a blue coat. Deacon Pettiford, 19 members of a church choir in their street clothes standing together out of habit. Half-pint Mabry by the door, still wearing that scarf in March. Cadillac Reese outside with the engine running. Old men who had walked over from the checkers tables in front of Blumstein's just to see. Not a weapon in the building. Bumpy Johnson had checked, personally, twice. At 2 o'clock exactly, 3 cars pulled up on 125th Street. Frank Ruggiero came in first and stopped 4 steps into the lobby. He had expected an ambush or an empty room or a table with chairs. He got 150 people in their Saturday clothes, standing perfectly still, looking at him. Somebody's baby made a noise and was hushed. The marble carried it. Charlie Luciano came in behind him with 2 men. He stopped in the same place Ruggiero had stopped. He looked around that lobby for a long moment. Then he took off his hat. Nobody ever agreed on why he did it. Some said respect, some said theater. Some said his mother raised him to take his hat off indoors and the reflex beat the man. Bumpy Johnson was standing by the front desk. He walked forward and put out his hand. They shook. Mr. Luciano. Mr. Johnson, there's a room off the lobby, it's quiet. Who's coming in? You, me, 2 of yours, 2 of mine. Luciano glanced back at the crowd. And them? They'll wait right here. For how long? Bumpy Johnson looked at him. As long as it takes.